Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Newburyport Historical Commission meeting for the 14th of January, 2021, and yet another Zoom virtual meeting. Present, we have, let's see, let's do a little roll call here. I see Patricia Pecknick,
Here.
Vice Chair, Joe Morgan,
Here.
Patrick McNamee.
Peter.
I'm sorry. Peter McNamee, who is muted right now, but I see him, so he's here. Christopher Fay.
Here.
Caitlin Sullivan, planner, is also on the line, and Malcolm Conrath is dialing in as we speak, and hopefully will be joining us shortly. So I've got some things to go over while we're trying to get him on board here. And let's see, do I have our, yep, we have our minute taker listening in as well. So and let's see, a number of members of the public. So let's get started without delay. It may go a little long, so let's get going. As per, most of you are familiar with these rules already. It is a Zoom meeting. Only the commissioners, that is the members of the panel, will be audio enabled all the time. We will have public comment period, I'm pretty sure. If you wish to make a comment, please raise your hand. You can find the control for that in the Zoom conference application. There's usually a little icon or something that says raise hand. And if you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise a hand and *6 to unmute yourself. During some deliberations, we might also want to use the raise hand functionality for panelists too, if things get if we get carried away, we'll see. As with any public meeting, if you are making a statement, please identify yourself, your name and address, as that's standard procedure for public meetings and public hearings. And also for the commissioners, if you're making a motion, please state or seconding it, and just state your name as well, so that the minute taker can have that information. And all our votes will be roll call votes for these Zoom meetings. I think that's it for my preambulatory remarks. Let's see if we got 948. Did we get Caitlin? Did we get Malcolm on board?
We did. I see him, and I have unmuted him.
Oh, okay. So is it possible to promote someone who's on the phone to a panelist, or is that not doable?
It is not, but he should be able to see the screen, and he can speak if he would like to.
Okay, so Malcolm, if you can hear me, presumably you can, try unmuting yourself if you're locally muted. So we just want to make sure we can hear you okay. Not hearing you, Malcolm. You may have to hit, was it *6 to unmute yourself? Is that what I said? Yeah, *6. Try that, because if we can't hear you, and obviously we can't consider you as attending the meeting. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 members. We do have a quorum. All right, well, I'll try a little longer, but for now we'll assume that he's not an active participant. The first item on our agenda is one that has been around for a while, I think approximately a year now. This is 93 State Street, otherwise known as the Institution for Savings. They have come up with a new iteration of their proposed plans. Will Attorney Mead be speaking on behalf of that applicant?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Lisa Mead. Mead, did you want to finish something? Or?
Yeah, just one thought. So my understanding, and I'll give you the floor in just a second, Attorney Mead. I just want to confirm, my understanding is that you will want, or the planning board, I think, is going to want an updated advisory report. So just confirm with me if that's, what your expectation is basically out of tonight's meeting, and then I'll, you can turn over the floor, and I believe Caitlin is presenting your the video display has your presentation as we speak.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that is correct. So just for the record, Lisa Mead, Costa 30 Green Street on behalf of the Institution for Savings. And we are here for a DoD review, which comes with it a recommendation or at least comments from this commission to the planning board for the DoD special permit, which is under consideration by the planning board. And Happy New Year to everyone. As the chair said, we have been doing this for about a year. With me this evening is Mike Jones, who is the CEO of the bank, Kim Rock, the COO of the bank, Christopher Angelakis, who is the architect. With him is Joanne Zhang, who is also part of ARC Architects, and Judith Selwyn, of course, the architectural historian. We are here for an advisory review. And Caitlin, if you could just go to the next slide, please. And the next one after that. So what we're going to present to you tonight are the changes we've made in the plan. I'm going to briefly go over specifically what some of those changes are, and then Christopher is going to walk you through the plans. We have his model plans pointing out some of the differences, and then we also have renderings. So in light of the commission's prior comments and those comments of the planning board, the bank has again undertaken a significant and complete redesign of the proposed addition. Specifically, they've decreased the usable square footage from 7,712 square feet to 6,512. They've removed all program space from the first floor and a reduction of program space on the second floor as a result. They've removed the hallway on the first floor. They've removed the loge overhang entry on the State Street side. The new design features include a new return to the brick facade to complement the existing structure, an increased number of windows on the Prospect Street facade to better complement the smaller proportioning of the buildings. A hip roof design was employed to decrease the overall height and massing, including the use of slate shingles. There's wood trim and copper cornice, which Christopher will go over with you. A mixture of masonry trim features, including 2 types of bricks that delineate the facades and break up the massing, a mixture of granite, limestone, and base lintel sills in the areas above the garage doors, and aluminum clad windows. So specifically, the building has a reduced footprint, and as a result of that, an increased setback in a number of areas. So there's an increased setback on Prospect Street. It was originally in our last proposal from 0 to 1.6 feet, and it's now between 5 and 6 feet along Prospect Street. The Otis Place side has a reduced setback. It was originally 0 to 3 feet in places, and now it's 9 feet 9 inches to 24 feet 7 inches. So there's a significant setback on Otis Place. And on the side that separates for Otis Place from the building, it originally was 5 feet 10 inches separation. And now we've pulled it back to 7 feet 7 inches. The design change in the building also results in a lower height comparison. The ridge height, most significantly, the proposed ridge is at 33 feet 3 inches. The 1870 building has a ridge of 33 feet 11 inches. 11 to 13 Prospect, which are those 3 major buildings along Prospect Street, are 37.3 inches. And there's a structure on Otis that you'll see in the plans that we're going to present at 32 feet 6 inches. The eave height is 24.6. The 1870 building has an eave height of 30 feet 8 inches. And 11 to 13 Prospect has an eave height of 23 feet 6 inches. And that selected structure on Otis has an eave height of 21 feet 7 inches. The mean on the proposed building is 28.11. The mean on the 1870 building is 32.2.5. The mean on 11 to 13 Prospect Street is 30 feet 6 inches. And the mean on that structure on Otis is 27 feet and a half inches. So all of the foregoing dimensional comparisons show the proposed addition will be subservient to the existing structure, both by distance and location on the lot, as well as dimension. Further dimensional comparisons expose that the building is compatible with the portion of property that is surrounded by residential structures. After Christopher reviews the plans with you, we think that you'll be able to see that given the reduction in size, location, and setbacks, as well as the roof design, that you'll be able to determine that the building does not detract, but is compatible with the historic scale and character of the historic structure and setting within the DoD. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christopher to review the changes.
Hi, thank you very much. So the way we've set up this presentation is, you could start with the slide 4, sure. And the way we set up the presentation is actually go through the previous scheme. So every slide we have here, the previous scheme is paired with the new scheme, so we can be very explicit about the changes that are made. And we're also, in this first part of the presentation, labeling some of the dimensional properties that Lisa just went through. That is just to make clear exactly what dimensions we're giving. So you can click to number 5. So here we're seeing what the current setbacks were of the previous, and those are things that Attorney Mead just went through. If you click to 6, here we could see how the project steps back very significantly on Otis Place. So up to 24 feet at the corner. And then the setback at Prospect Street really sits back to 5'6". The design changes to all of this, before we go further, are actually a result of listening very deeply to a lot of things that were said, specifically by the neighborhood, in what things they seem to value the most. And what we heard and what we reacted to was setbacks and height. And in scale, of course, has always been in play, and we've continued to try to have this building approach the scale of the neighborhood, but now setting back in a way that's actually more indicative of commercial properties around the city. So we continue to click through these. We can go through probably pretty quickly. The previous, in slide 8, really points out that the relationship of the eave height from the previous scheme to this to the other side of the street. And then the next slide is only to be very transparent about the fact that the eave height has not changed on this proposal, but is the same. But you can very much see that the change in roof design has a very big impact on mass, and we'll get to that a little bit further into the presentation. Number 10, essentially just has the same piece of information, but I think it's important to look at it from down the other direction too. So we're actually looking straight down Prospect Street here, as if you're standing in the middle of the road, and if you click through, you can see the change in massing.
Pardon the interruption, but it's not an illusion, but it looks like the pitch of the roof is less.
Yes, we did two things. We lowered the pitch and we made it a hip. And so both of those take the apparent mass of the building way down. So we were looking around the neighborhood for precedents as well. There are a number of buildings in the neighborhood that have pitched roof. I mean, I'm sorry, hip roofs. So we did not, including the 1871 building. So click to, in succession, 12 and 13. So 12, this actually shows where we were in the previous with the setback, the rear yard setback. And we actually, what we actually did was pull this back out about 1.5 feet away from that setback. So if you can click back to 12, you can toggle and see. And here it's a little harder to tell because the massing of the building has changed. Apparent massing has changed so much, and we're actually setting back so much further on Otis Place. But there is another 1.5 feet that we've set back off the rear yard.
Just also to clarify, so you're saying in addition to the setback from Otis Place, is there an additional setback between your structure and that gambrel roof house next door?
Yes, the whole property line that's considered rear yard setback,
right,
as there's an additional 1.5 that
Oh, I
we
see,
pulled
yeah.
off of that. So it went from 5 foot setback off that property line to 7.5. And because the building isn't parallel to almost any of the property lines, there's always a range. So
Yep.
in that one, we've given the closest we ever get to the furthest. So
Okay.
it's 7'1"
Thank you.
to 7'7". And those are just the views that we chose to kind of describe some of the dimensional changes that happen. But the next series of slides are ones that you're all familiar with, even though we've paired them with the previous to the new, just so we can actually walk through all of the views that are familiar to everyone and see how the massing has changed from the previous scheme that was presented to this one. So this was the previous scheme with the gable roof, and then click through to the next scheme and you can see how that and click through. The other thing that you're noticing as we're walking down Prospect Street, yeah, you can keep clicking through kind of. What you're noticing is that the mass that is actually on Prospect Street, if you can just hold here for a second, the actual mass of the brick volume that you're seeing is actually thinner too. If you toggle back to 21, you can see the difference in the apparent width of the mass that was on Prospect Street to this one. And this had to do with some technical things, but also very much caring about how putting the smaller scale elements on the street. And you can start clicking through to 23. In 24, you notice that the porch element or loggia element has come off. There's no longer occupied space any longer down on the ground floor. So there's no longer sort of an entry condition that happens. This is the Garden Street side. We can click through this very quickly. Not much has changed other than the profile of the roof you can see comes down. Now, I think it's worth holding on these next few slides a little bit. One of the things we've very much tried to do was figure out how to work the program to, if you click back to 29, please. You can see in the previous scheme, yeah, that's fine. The previous scheme here was sitting very close to Otis Street property line, but when we clicked to 30, setting back and very much creating a street wall with the adjacent house and really trying to look at window spacing, window proportions to have more of a dialogue with this particular house, which is unique in its size and its detailing, and actually quite a challenge to build next to for anybody. But that's one of our we put a lot of effort into setting back and really clearing that corner, so to speak. And we can click to 31. And this is a view that everyone's very familiar with, looking back down Prospect Street, and click to 32. And here the scale change is quite apparent. And it's worth maybe toggling back one more time to 31 and then to 32. The changing of the gable roof and pulling the one story off the corner and allowing us to set back the whole building, we think has a very big shift in scale here. And then the next two slides really are details of the facade. I think last time we met, people were very interested in seeing how it approached the street. And here it's very apparent that the number of windows on this facade has increased. That's to sort of deal with the solid to void ratio. We looked very carefully at the window proportions and sizes on this scheme, and also seeing the landscape buffer as we are able to set back here. And then in the next two slides are ones that we're all familiar with, which are the aerials, and it really shows what the massing manipulations were to achieve what we've come back with. As you can see, the materiality of it, yeah, you can go on to 27 and 28. The materiality of it is brick to match the 1980s building on as we attached. We are proposing a potentially different color, maybe darker brick towards the Prospect Street side. That is there to enhance the sort of separation of these masses. The spaces in between these particular brick masses are proposed to be stone, limestone lintels, sills, and limestone infills, and the whole building being set on a granite base. The cornice is being proposed to be copper and a slate shingle roof. And that goes through our views.
Another quick interruption. It looks like are the brick, the Prospect Street side, the brick looks a little darker than the one further in Otis Place. Is that correct, or is that just an illusion?
Yeah, I was just referring to that. The brick on the kind of rear lot side would match the 1980s building.
I see.
And the brick on the Prospect Street side, we are proposing to be a slightly darker
Okay.
brick color to help separate the kind of massing. You know, we're trying to separate visually the masses to have them feel like separate masses. And so the change in color and potentially the change in coursing is a tool that we can use to do that.
Yep. Okay.
So if you could go to the renderings, please. There you go, Christopher.
Right, and so this is going to take you through a number of the same views we just saw, but these are much more photorealistic. So instead of being a more technical drawing, these are placed a little bit more in context. So again, this is how it feels from State Street, and there's a lot of foliage in the way. In the winter, it might be a bit more apparent, but you can click to number 2. Number 2 starts to give you a sense of how bringing the gable to a hip starts to affect the massing. And 3 is just stepping up a bit closer in the relationship of the 80s building to this building and the separation we're trying to design in between the two masses. And 4 is a little bit of more of a facade detail. And 5 takes us back to look into sort of the turnaround. This is a little bit of an elevated view, sort of a second floor view from across the way. And 6, the Otis Place view. And again, you can see that even in this rendering, there is a kind of separation of brick color between the two masses. And 7. And again, highlighting the relationship of the facade to the adjacent buildings.
I notice you still have the chimney. Is it still going to be functional?
Yes, it'll be functional on the second floor.
Second floor. Okay.
Yes. And 8.
So I think what's a couple of things I want to just highlight. If you could go back to slide 7 for a moment. One of the things that we really worked on was the massing of the building and the hip roof, but in particular in this view, given the setback on Otis with the creation of the green space there, you'll see the exposure to 4 Otis that now exposes that house and the bay window in front down the street, notwithstanding there are no windows on that side of the house except for in the rear, on the rear back corner on that side. So we think it exposes the street and it doesn't overwhelm this corner. That was something that Christopher worked on a lot. And then similarly, what the aerial photos would show you, and I don't know if you can go back to the previous presentation, Caitlin, and go back to slide 27, perhaps. No, one of the aerials, I think is the second to the last. I'm sorry, I couldn't see right there. There you go. I think that one of the things that's really important, go to the next one, please, is that you see the massing of and the roof size and the width of the buildings on the left-hand side of Prospect Street, the major contributing buildings on that side, versus what's now been broken down and the size and height of the massing on the buildings on the new proposed structure. And there was a lot of work to bring those down and bring it in. And we think that as a result, it both fits in with the bank itself, given its location on the lot, and then the neighborhood, as I've just exposed on the Otis Street view. So with that, I don't know if you want to go back to the renderings, Caitlin, to that, and I think we'll take questions from the board.
One quick, and I had, did you guys have a chance to do redo, I should say, the shadow studies?
We haven't had a chance to redo those. We thought that we would do that for the planning board.
Mhm.
The building is, the roof pitch is different, obviously. The E height is the same, and of course it's pulled back from the street.
Right.
So I don't believe there will be a, any greater impact on shadows. My thought is it's going to be less, but we haven't had a chance to finish those.
Yeah, I would I would expect that it would be improved.
Right.
Okay, well, let me, we'll allow public comment on this, but before I open that section, let me see if I see a couple hands up on the board. So let me turn first to Peter McNamee. Your hand is up. Did you want to ask a question or something?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just again, I'm going to
Sure.
recuse myself.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Yep, just FYI, everyone, that Peter is a nearby neighbor, and throughout this the course of this particular project has been recusing himself. Thank you, Peter, for reminding me of that. Patricia Pecknick, did you have something to ask or say?
I have two quick questions. In the
Sure.
height comparison, it mentions Otis Place selected structure, and I'm wondering if that's number 5 Otis Place. And my second question is, was removing the loggia, is that contribute to the calculation of subtracting usable space?
So I think we're going to need to go back to the, there we go, and up towards the beginning.
Probably number 3. Yeah, I was wondering about that too, that the selected structure, if
Right.
that was,
So I think it's slide, maybe it's 5.
I concluded that it was 5 from looking. I just wanted to see.
No,
if-
I was talking about slide 5.
Oh, I thought it was number 5 Otis. I wasn't sure is it
So
this house or no?
I'm gonna let Christopher answer that question. I don't think we're on the right slide.
Okay.
The setback slide. So you want to go a couple more, Caitlin, please? Keep going.
Yeah, I don't think we call it out in these 3Ds because you never see it. I believe the board member is probably correct, but I can't say right now which one
Okay.
by address it is.
Okay.
I do believe it's the one here on the corner.
Oh, on the corner. Okay, thank you.
I think so.
And my other question is just the loggia that.
Yeah, that does not contribute to square footage.
Yeah,
No,
thank you.
it did not. That did not affect the square footage calculation at all.
Thank you.
so that selected address is not the gambrel roof. That's the abutter there, direct abutter in the back.
I would like to be able to get back to you with that
Okay.
answer because
Okay.
it's, we didn't record it here and
Yep.
I don't
Okay.
want to give you an answer that's wrong.
Sure. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands among my board, so I will open a public comment period. So again, I'll remind people, if you do want to make a public comment, please keep it brief. We've really had a bad week, so I really would rather not have another very late night. And give your name and address, please. And if if a previous person has already pretty much said what you want to say, you can, try to find a way of either lowering a hand or saying what he said. Okay, with that, I see Peter Mackin has a hand up. So looks like you've been enabled. You will have to locally unmute yourself as well when we enable you.
Okay, this is Pete Mackin. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I'm at 13 Prospect Street. I would say it's still a large a 2-story building, but this proposal is much better than the prior proposals. The bank has made a number of positive changes, and in our minds, it's now more architecturally compatible with the existing buildings. The brick construction, the roof line, the setback on the corner of Prospect and Otis are all major improvements. I do have two other points. One is a clarification question with regard to setback on Prospect. Currently, the sidewalk on Prospect is 6 foot wide. Is the distance to the curb from the building on Prospect 5 foot 5 feet, or is it 11.5 feet?
Sounds like you're asking if it includes the sidewalk.
Correct. Or not?
No,
Okay,
I'm gonna, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
So it does not include the sidewalk. So the board has the site plans. The sidewalk is to the property line.
Okay, so the property line to the building is 5.5 feet.
That's correct.
Wonderful. And
5 feet 5 at one end and 5 feet 7 at the other.
okay, and the other comment was currently and in many of the earlier proposals, there is lighting at both sides of on Prospect, both sides of the building that you're proposing. I don't see any lighting on the Otis Street side of the new proposal. Do you plan lighting over in that corner?
I believe that on the plans, there is a light at the door that would operate only when the door opens and closes, that emergency exit door. But I'm going to flip through the plans while we're taking other questions, and I'll make sure I answer that question properly.
Okay, thank you. I think that it's important to have light there in some light in the evening because of just safety purposes.
There is a street light right there on the corner.
Okay.
So as you live there, you know that. So there is we actually looked at that street light to make sure that there was lighting back there.
Okay, that's all my comments. Thank you very much.
okay, thank you, Mr. Mackin. Is there any other member of the public who would like to make a comment at this point? I'm not seeing a hand, but I'll give it a few seconds to see if someone would like to raise it and make a comment. I should be thankful that we don't have an extended thing, but Caitlin, you don't see any hands raised either, do you? Oh, wait, there's son.
Yep.
Mr. Pollock, we see your hand. Did you want to make a comment? You have to unmute yourself locally.
Yeah, it's Richard Pollock from 5 and 7, 1 and 3, 5 and 7 Garden Street. I was wondering what the back wall looks like that's facing my property, my backyard. Are there going to be windows in it? Is it just a solid brick wall? Are they going to be open to the garage, and etc.?
Mr. Chair, perhaps Caitlin, you could take us back to the model for a minute. It will have windows just like the Prospect Street side. And we do have a view of that Garden Street side that we showed. So it has windows and brick, and it's broken up just like the Prospect Street side. So if you can slide down a little bit, Caitlin.
It sounds like you're saying, Ms. Mead, that it looks very similar to the Prospect Street side.
That is correct.
So
Yeah.
there'll be closed windows on the garage side then, basically?
Yes.
We won't get all the fumes from the garage, I guess. That's
Nope.
what I was concerned about in the backyard.
No.
Okay. And my other
No,
comment, my other comments are, it's very improved from the original designs, but it's still very massive to be set in the neighborhood. If we saw this the first thing without the original designs, we'd say, boy, that's just a massive structure to be put into a historical neighborhood. I know it's smaller than the original, but it's still massive. And I don't know how it fits with the historical nature of the neighborhood. It's not like the other properties that are in the neighborhood. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Pollock. And please put your hand down when you're done. I see a Claire Papanastasiou.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'd like to echo Peter Mackin's comments, as well as Richard's Pollock's to a degree, but I do want to say that this design is much better. And on a larger level and a bigger level, very gratified to see that the process is working in terms of hearing the feedback from the neighborhood and the roles of the historical commission and all that. So we've seen improvement and very much appreciated.
Thank you very much. I see a Paula Renda. Well, let's see if we can get you enabled. It's interesting. I don't see an audio icon. Okay, there you go. You are now enabled on our side.
Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, so I would like to mimic the past three speakers, although there are several improvements, and I, like Claire, appreciate the process and am thankful that the bank is responding and hearing us. However, I do still feel it's a massive structure for this neighborhood. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll give it a few seconds, see if there are any other hands. Caitlin, do you see any other hands?
I do not.
All right, then I'll officially close the public comment period and we can have some discussion among the
Oh,
board.
Mr. Chair, there is one more right here.
Uh-oh.
Just popped up.
Shall I exercise my phenomenal cosmic power to reopen the public comment period? Okay, just for this one, Robert. Okay, we'll briefly reopen public comment period to allow Robert to speak. I just have the first name. We should be able to hear you now.
Hi, it's Sandra Nogler, 11 Prospect Street. I concur with the last woman's comments, and I see a lot of improvement on the Otis Place, but not too much on the Prospect Street side of the building. I feel that you've made a significant improvement, but in my opinion, it is not an improvement enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now we will close the public comment period. So turning to the board, would someone like to react, ask a question, make a comment, voice an opinion? Okay, Mr. Morgan, what would you like to say?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I certainly agree with all of the neighbors, the abutters, that there's been a tremendous amount of work done, and it's reduced the perceived mass of the structure. I think it's actually starting to be a very refined, compact little structure. And I think that the setbacks have really helped to sort of decompress its relationship to the street, even though the eave has not been reduced. Unfortunately, as much as it's responding to the comments of the neighborhood, and I think that might be paramount. It has not at all responded, as far as I can tell. It's taken steps backward in terms of its historical relationship to the neighborhood. And I feel that we've lost some information here from our numerous discussions on this last year. Maybe we've forgotten because we just haven't met for so long. But the Secretary of the Interior Standards requires that the structure responds to its historical context in terms of materials and scale. And by introducing brick again, you've taken a step back. In introducing lower pitch roofs that do not respond to the immediate vernacular, the immediate historical context, you've taken a step backward. So I just don't know where this is going. But in terms of what we have to decide on the historical commission, if the Secretary of the Interior standards are to be taken seriously and applied, this is going the wrong way. So forgive me, I like to compliment the architect's design, compliment the work that's been done and its response to the neighborhood comments. But from my perspective as being a commissioner, speaking about the historical contextual issues, this is not doing it. This is going the wrong way. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Well, let me ask a question. Actually, Caitlin, let me see if there's one that will show this on the roof pitch aspect. Why don't you go to slide 11, Caitlin? And this is a question for the architect, I suppose. It's true that most of those, like we don't see in this view any hip roofs. They're all standard gable roofs, but the roof pitch, did you take a look at how the pitch compares? Because I think that the last set of plans, the pitch, in fact, I remember commenting on it, the roof had a pretty steep pitch, and I asked about it, and you said you needed room for mechanicals and such. This one to me actually looks more, the pitch at least seems more historically appropriate, but yeah, it's true that the neighborhood doesn't, it's a period, kind of a mid to latter half of the 19th century, Greek revival and so on, and quote unquote Victorian, that tends to have a steeper pitch. Looking on this view, it looks like the house down at the corner of Otis and Prospect that you can see sticking out there has a steeper pitch, but yet the ones on Prospect don't. But it's hard to tell just from this. So I'm asking the architect, did you do some analysis of the roof designs and pitches in that area to see where you fell?
Well, we've been looking at the roof profiles around the neighborhood. And I think as you might find in any, modern neighborhood who's been around for a long time, there's a whole catalog of different roof styles, pitches, finishes, eave conditions, cornices. And I feel that we had, I feel that our charge here is to have a building that fits within the larger context. And just like it's very hard to pick an eave height, it's very hard to pick a window style. I think what we did do is look around enough to know that this isn't inappropriate. It's not foreign to any of the buildings in the surrounding neighborhood. And what it does do is help address scale issues, which is why one would make a choice to do a hip for what the building profile is expected to be. I would also just say that we have done the study to make sure that whatever mechanicals are being utilized are going to fit within the attic space of this building, and that's not a concern of ours at this point.
Mm-hmm.
We've done that study.
Okay, thanks. And Patricia, I see you put your hand up. Let me ask one other question before I turn it over to you. And that's about height. As is noted, the eave height is about the same as it was before. And the reduction in mass was achieved basically through a combination of setback and roof change rather than changing the overall height, which would have required redesigning giving up parking, right? One layer of parking. I'm just curious as to, that program decision. Was that just, if you could kind of talk to why you came out with doing it, trying to do it this way rather than eliminate one level of parking, which would have, resulted in a significant height reduction.
So I'll take that one.
Okay.
So the city requires a certain number of parking spaces under the ordinance. And we need to provide that number of parking spaces. The bank needs to provide parking spaces for its employees and those who do work at the bank, examiners or whatever, as well as guests and customers. So we need the parking. And to eliminate an entire level of parking would require the bank to find that parking someplace else and apply for a special permit under the ITIF. When we started this project a year ago, we actually did not have enough parking, and we were applying for a special permit for parking. And half of Upper State Street, Harris Street, library people, everybody you can think of, including this neighborhood, were up in arms about not having enough parking on site. So the bank needs to provide the parking. The city wants them to provide the parking. The city being all those people who came out to those first original meetings. And the bank doesn't want to have their parking spaces on these streets. And the neighbors, including neighbors in this immediate neighborhood, every meeting have talked about their concern about parking on the streets from the bank. So the bank is providing parking to satisfy its needs, as well as address those that have been expressed by not only these immediate neighbors, but neighbors across the street, including library users.
Okay, I suspected it was something like that because Attorney Mead, I do recall from those early meetings that the opposition to some of the parking arrangements was quite
Vociferous.
fierce. Yeah, vociferous. That was a word that was on my mind too. All right, Patricia Pecknick, my vice chair, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, thank you. And I did discover earlier in the meeting that my fire alarm works, so I hope I was muted for that.
Yeah, apparently you were.
But yeah, this commission has always asked for a reduction in height at every meeting since the first. We are not alone in that. The planning board at the last meeting asked the applicant to, lower the entire structure. I remember there was a discussion in which the applicant asked whether lowering it 5 feet would be sufficient. And the planning board said, we can't give you an exact number. This is going to be a function of the proposal in its entirety. So the ridge height in the last proposal was 37 feet. And now it's 33.4. So we didn't even get down 5 feet yet. I think bringing the ridge height down 3 feet 8 isn't really sufficient in reviewing this, in historical review. And the applicant mentioned that dropping the eave line dropping the building 5 feet would take the eave line down to 20. I'm not saying that's the magic number, but we're still at 24.6, which is a foot above that tallest house on Prospect. So I'm going to offer the same comments about the height as I've offered on in the last proposals, because the height is the same. And then my comment is that to satisfy the standards and the DO ordinance in relation to the setting, the height needs to come down. I appreciate, some of the things that are done to break up the massing, although I think the recess in the wall on Prospect Street should be deepened, but I'm really just still focusing on the height. The DOD ordinance requires adherence to the Secretary's standards and the National Park bulletins. And so I'm going to quote the same bulletins I've previously quoted, one on new additions and densely built environments that says the height should be consistent with the height not only of the historic building, but of other surrounding buildings. And that even if the facade of the addition can be broken up into elements that are consistent with the scale of the historic building, they have to be consistent with the scale of adjacent buildings. So to restate what was also said in our last advisory review discussion from the brief on new additions historic buildings, we see that new construction must be subordinate to buildings in visible and close proximity to historic buildings. Designing a new exterior addition to an historic building, the National Park Service says, the new addition should be smaller than the historic building. It should be subordinate in size and design. I'm not getting hung up on the massing right now. I'm really focusing on the height as the thing that makes it not comply with the standards or the DOD ordinance. The brief on new additions and densely built environment states that it's important that the addition will reinforce the scale and character of its setting. And again, the Department of the Interior always talks about protecting other surrounding buildings in the district. I don't know what eave height typical means. The phrase eave height typical is used in describing the eave. I'm not sure what the word typical mean. I'm frustrated that we're always being asked to look at the view down Prospect from State through a screen of non-existent trees that are 50 feet tall. I wish that didn't happen. And we on the commission were criticized for picking only a couple buildings to do height comparisons. And so I think it's fair, given that criticism, for the applicant to present height comparisons for all the houses on Prospect and Otis instead of a couple today. The fact that the applicant needs parking isn't something that we can discuss at the Historical Commission. I did hear things, the planning board suggesting, losing a level of parking, and we have had those conversations, but that's not, we can't protect the applicant's interest in having the parking. It's just still too high. I think beginning the discussion today is important. We didn't get the plans until Friday. I'd be happy to continue the discussion, but I don't think that has given us enough time. So that's all for me for now.
Excuse me. Okay, thank you, Patricia.
Chair?
Just 1 second, Attorney Mead. You will have another opportunity to respond. However, any other comments from the board, like Christopher Fay? You haven't, I know you briefly expressed an opinion previously. Any comments at all?
I have nothing further to add based on what I've said previously. Yeah, it's too big.
I know previously you expressed that you thought it was too big, too massive. Sounds like you haven't changed your mind.
Haven't changed my mind. Nope.
Okay. Now, Malcolm, I think you're still out there. Well, maybe not now that I see it. Well, anyway, if you are, try pressing *6 to see if you can actually be heard. Try that one more time. If not, we'll give up on that. And let me go back to panelists. Okay, while we're waiting to see if he chimes in, did you want to make a comment or respond, Attorney Mead?
I did, because I think it's really important. The height of this building is consistent with the average height of the buildings in the neighborhood. The eave height is a little taller than the eave height of the ones at, basically the 3 major buildings across, or 4 major buildings across the street on Prospect Street. And similarly, not inconsistent with those buildings on Otis. The height is smaller, shorter than the existing structure, the historic building in every way, the mean, the ridge, and the eave. And it is shorter than the ridge lines of a number of the buildings around Prospect Street and Otis. So it's just not true that this building is taller than the entire neighborhood. It's just not true. And we've provided those measurements. The next thing is, I think that and maybe I misunderstood what the vice chair said, but the renderings that we have shown, and this rendering in particular right here is a good example. The only larger tree that we show here is a tree to be planted to show what it would look like. The other trees that are on this proposal, particularly the ones looking down Prospect from State, those exist. We're not taking those away. Those exist. That's a true view from State Street down Prospect Street. The only new tree is this tree right here that we show larger as it would be to be more full grown. But the other trees exist. And so to take those trees out would actually not be an actual representation of what exists on this in this neighborhood and on this property. So you may have an opinion that you believe that your interpretation of the Secretary of Interior standards, which are very subjective, don't agree, but it's just not true factually that this building is not consistent with the height and or shorter in some respects to the height as it's measured from the rest of the neighborhood. And that's important. I think it's also important to address the comment by Mr. Morgan relative to of the neighborhood. And, you know, we've had this struggle for a while relative to what neighborhood is this in and what is it a part of. And, you know, this is a commercial building. And so we have made it of the neighborhood in scale and massing and a number of other elements, but it's still a part of the historic bank building. And so I understand that Mr. Morgan would like it to be clabbered similar to some of the other residential structures, but it doesn't make it not correct. And again, this is the subjective interpretation of the Secretary of the Interior standards. This building, the Secretary of the Interior standards also notes that if the building is of a distance from the original structure, it should be considered a separate structure. And so it does not detract. I don't think that it's a fair statement or an objective review to say that this building detracts from the 1871 building, which is up on State Street. It complements that building. It certainly doesn't overtake it. It is smaller in height for sure, and certainly the same height or smaller than a number of the components of the surrounding structures. And I just think those facts are important to keep in mind. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it doesn't, the standards don't say it should be read as a separate structure. They say that if there's a connector between the historic structure and the addition is at a distance, that it may be able to read as a separate structure. And I also want to say, you know, the eve line was 24.6, the eve line is 24.6. I'm not addressing that as a subjective thing. That's just the numbers that you had provided in your presentation.
Right, but that's only one of the measurements, with all due respect to the vice chair. The ridge height and the mean height are all smaller than the surrounding or shorter than the surrounding neighborhoods. And I think it's really important to note that you use the term may, which is true. This is the whole point about the Secretary of the Interior standards. And I'm not saying that your opinion is incorrect, but that's the issue with the Secretary of the Interior standards. And we believe that this now is compatible with the neighborhood and certainly doesn't overwhelm any part of either the neighborhood on State Street or on Otis Place and Prospect Street.
Okay, if I could take back control for a moment. And I see, Joe, I see your hand. Let me just do one thing real quick. Caitlin, could you go back? I think it was about slide 3 or 4. I think it was in this presentation. Yeah, 3. This is where these numbers are. So most of the numbers should be here. And this is, of course, this is the one we have Otis selected structures. We're not sure about that. But anyway, so let's, ridge height. It looks like the, Ms. Mead, it sounds like the point you're trying to make is that compared to many of the houses on Prospect Street, I'm thinking of those large 2-family ones directly across, the ridge height is slightly lower, 3, 4, 5, about 3 or almost 4 feet lower. The eave height is about a foot higher, and so this is a reflection of the decreased slope of the roof, that the ridge could be lower yet the eave higher. So is this where you were making your point that it's not higher than the neighborhood buildings?
That's correct. And the mean also, which is how we measure, of course.
Yeah, which is not on here for some reason.
I'll tell you what the mean is. So the mean of the proposed is 2811. The mean of the 1870 building is 32.5. And the mean of 11 to 13 Prospect is 30 feet 6 inches. And the mean of the selected structures, which I'm hoping Christopher identifies, is 27 feet 1/2 inch.
Yeah, that is the one on the corner of Otis and Prospect. So I believe that's 16 Prospect, right?
On Otis and Prospect. Okay, so across Otis Place.
Yeah.
Okay. was I going to say? The only comment I have on this, and then I'll get to you, Mr. Morgan, is that the mean is a little misleading when in two ways, especially with respect to the historic building that has essentially a flat roof. So that calculation, I assume the mean is kind of like the average height. All right. I believe
Right.
that's what that means. So when you've got a flat roof like that, that kind of, it's going to have a different visual effect than a pitched roof, where the average will be, somewhere roughly midway up the roof, give or take, whatever, depending on how the math works out.
Right. Which is
So it's a
right.
little, there's a little bit apples and
But
oranges, but I take your
isn't
point.
that the point? Is the
Right.
original building was a hip roof with a low mean to decrease the mass of that of the part of the existing building. I think, I mean, like any design, we're trying to use the tools that are available to designers to achieve a goal, and the goal is to reduce the visible mass of a building.
Mhm.
And so choosing roof pitches and roof styles to accomplish that goal is exactly what we heard asked of us coming out of the last round of meetings.
Yeah, my comments weren't intended to disparage or discredit that design choice. I was just saying that it's a little bit tough because the historic building has an unusual roof, both especially for that neighborhood where you've got all these pitched roofs around. That was my only point.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Mr. Richards, I just want to point out, that's why we put all three measurements in there.
Mhm.
So nobody's trying to hide anything here. That's why we did the ridge, the eve, and the mean. I just wanted to be clear about what all of those were.
Okay. Oh, except the mean is missing on the slide.
Right. But it's in my submission, which you all have in front
Okay.
of you.
Yeah.
And it's in the line drawings that you've also all received.
Yeah. Okay. It's my personality. I can't help commenting on little things like that. Mr. Morgan, you've been wanting to say something, so why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, and in fact, my comments were really relative to these numbers. I shot these numbers with a laser. It was last summer because I had to do it in the evening because of the intensity of the sun on the faces of the Prospect buildings. But I shot the roof, the low roof, which actually is 80% of the roof of the historical building, the 1870 building, and that's at 24 feet. So if you were to weight that for an average, you probably find that actually it's well below 30 feet, the mean of the average height of the building. I'm not talking about the mode. I'm not talking about the middle between the maximum and the minimum. I'm talking about the mean weighted per roof area. Okay. Now the 11 to 13 Prospect Street buildings and ones before them, like 7, 9, are in the range of what I shot, I believe was, don't have the numbers here in front of me right now, but I remember something like in the range of 21 to 23 feet. The one at the corner of Otis and Prospect, I believe, was around 21 or 21.6. So I would ask the architect to check these numbers again, because they don't line up with what I shot last summer. So.
Well, we could get you and Meridian together to reconcile your numbers, because they went out and did the same activity
Absolutely.
for us.
I'd be happy
They have produced a document that has given us all of these existing building numbers. So
exactly. I would like to review their numbers. I would like to review their entire calculations, please. If they could provide those, I would do that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comment from the board? I don't see any other hands up. And I guess there isn't anyone else left to comment since Peter is recused. Okay, well, I don't really might have anything else to say myself. I think that I will offer my own reactions. Similar to as several members of the public said, it's an improvement. I think that the renderings do show the impact of the combination of the roof change and the setback to present a less of a overwhelming feel to it. But before tonight's meeting, when I was looking at this and thinking about the return to the brick cladding versus clapboards, I could sort of go, I see the argument both ways, and especially with, I think that the brick, is certainly recognizable. How should I say this? Where it is a commercial structure, I can sort of see the argument for that, even though I don't think there are any brick residences in that area, but we're not talking about a residence, right? And we're never going to be able to escape the problem of the fact that we're building a commercial or propose to build a commercial building in that juts into and surrounded on three sides by residential structures. That's just a fact of life that you guys are dealing with, and we're all dealing with, us on the commission, the abutters, and the institution for savings. So, I think a couple of things to follow up on. What can I'm trying to think what the easiest way why don't we do this as far as the meridian things? Are there contact information on the plan somewhere? I can't flip to it right now, but maybe just maybe we can get Joe in touch with them so they can compare the measurements and how they were each taken to see if one or the other may be an error or not.
Mr. Chair, we would like to have this, the commission's review move forward tonight. So I'm not really sure how we're going to do that. We can certainly have Meridian verify that as at a follow-up submission to the commission. It would be highly unusual, with all due respect to Mr. Morgan, to have a commission member call and have a private conversation with the consultant to the applicant outside of a public hearing. So, I'm not really sure what, we have the plans in front of you. The plans are stamped. You have the renderings, we have the line drawings, we have, happy to do it, but.
Can I ask a question of Caitlin? Caitlin, are you?
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, I'm sorry. When were the plans submitted, and were they submitted on time, and what's the deal with that? Because I didn't see them and posted till Friday.
Yep, I believe we received the plans Thursday late afternoon, and then they were posted Friday morning. We have a 1-week deadline for revised plans to be submitted to the Historical Commission.
Okay.
Well, two things. Let's tackle the easier one first. When Lisa Mead, when you said you'd like to proceed tonight, could you explain exactly what you had in mind?
Well, I would like our presentation to be done and for the commission to undertake drafting a decision or a recommendation to the planning board.
I see. Okay. And you're right. I don't know of a precedent for what was discussed with Mr. Morgan and the now Meridian. Is Meridian that they're not the architects, right? Are they civil engineers or what?
There are surveyors and civil engineers.
Right.
I think it's fine for Mr. Morgan to rely on his own calculations then.
All right. Well, what we can do is, as far as that, I think we can, if there, as you point out, Attorney Mead, the engineering firm has supplied their drawings. They've got their their stamp, if you will, on them. So the assumption is that they are correct to the best of their knowledge. We can after this, outside this meeting, Joe can review what he has measured and try to compare them to what we've got there and see what we see if we can resolve what any apparent differences, see what the deal is with that. But and as far as drafting a report, what I can try to do is create a draft that we can review as a board at our meeting of our second meeting of this month, which is, I believe, the 20. Hang on, wait for it, the 28th, to see if the board is comfortable with whatever it is I end up writing, which at the moment I'm really not sure, but because I'm gonna have to put all this together and figure out where it all falls out. I want to review the standards again. I know Ms. Peknick has quoted some of those, so I want to again consider how they apply it in this case. You made a point, Attorney Mead, about the interpretation of the standards being subjective, and to a large extent, I'll have to agree that it's true that their interpretation is subjective. But it can be made less so by reliance on experience, reliance on case history, so to speak, in the sense of other things that have been done, good and bad examples. The Secretary of the Interior generally does supply examples of, what things that do or don't comply and so forth that can be used to help remove some of the ambiguity to exactly how those standards are to be applied. And then this board will do its best to apply them in a way that we think is appropriate and fair to both the applicant and the city and the standards and the abutters and everybody else involved. All right, so.
May I add something before you step away?
Okay, you just got in there just in the nick of time before I was about to move on. Go ahead,
No, but yeah, so, as long as we are reasonable, fair, rational, and consistent in our interpretation and application of the standards,
Mhm.
that's actually what this board's job is. So.
Yeah. Yep, I agree.
Can I just have a clarification on the process, Mr. Chair, because it sounds like it's a little bit different than how you've done it in the past. Not that I'm not arguing with that. I just want to understand. So is it your intention that you would prepare a recommendation and then present it to the commission at the next meeting for their approval before it gets put onto the planning board? Because we were looking at next week and that doesn't sound like it's going to happen. And so if you're then looking at your meeting on the 28th, that means that we're into February or so into the planning board.
Well, it's been done two ways in the past. In the first couple of instances for this particular application, I was basically prepared the report and sent it on to the planning board. I think was the third iteration of that. That was strenuously objected to by the applicant. That would be you, Ms. Mead, as not reflecting the opinion of the entire board, and you wanted it be brought back to the board for their review and to verify that it did accurately reflect the views of the board. So that's why I was proposing to do it that way. That's all. And I think, especially in this case, I think that's probably a good idea because, it's a complex project. I know I want to think about it some more in terms of putting together everything I've heard tonight between the comments of the board and the abutters and the applicant, architect and yourself. And I think given the importance and magnitude of this particular project, that it's only fair to the applicant to ensure that the report accurately reflects the sense of the commission.
I don't disagree with that because that was my complaint before. I didn't believe that, as you well know, that the recommendation reflected the conversation that took place at the commission. So I guess we're gonna have to live with that. We won't be into the planning board until February.
Okay. Okay. Well, don't go anywhere, Ms. Mead. I think you may be involved in the next discussion. That ends the discussion of the project for the Institution for Savings at 93 State Street. We're going to move on to the project also represented by Mead, Tullerman, and Costa at 3 Hancock Street. This was a case where it was a raising of the roof, you might recall. This we met back, well, this was continued from 10 December where there was some rather lengthy discussion because it got involved with how the scope of the well, among other things, the scope of the commission's, for lack of a better term, jurisdiction or legal authorization, and among other things. So let me just say first a couple of words about that, because there was a correspondence from Attorney Mead to the board, to myself and the board, that made reference to the scope of the committee, of the commission's, what it can lawfully do or not do, and the procedure. So I just want to, so I know Vice Chair Pecknick and myself have a couple words on that. And for those, I assume the members of the board have reviewed that memo. This is the memo of 8th of January from Attorney Mead. And in it, Ms. Mead mentions the protracted discussion which may have gone into matters beyond our lawful jurisdiction. And so the first thing I'll point out is that there was no actual motion or action taken that exceeded our lawful jurisdiction. And I think the reason for that is that I think I understood as chair that that point is well taken, and that there are limits to our what we lawfully can and cannot do. I do, however, disagree with Attorney Mead's opinion that about what constitutes what are the requirements are in a vote of because the way I read the ordinance, and we have checked with the planning board and others, that and they generally agree with my reading, which is that the ordinance very explicitly states, and you quote this in your memo, Attorney Mead, that 4 members constitute a quorum, and any approval shall require a positive vote of a quorum. The term "a quorum" having just been defined as 4 members. So that's why I held that at least that a vote, if there were only 4 members present, they would have to be unanimous for it to be an affirmative vote. And I still hold to that. And I should point out to all the commissioners that, you know, any memo opining about the board's scope or jurisdiction or procedure is just that. It's an opinion. It's kind of analogous, if you will, if this was a legal proceeding, it'd be like a lawyer's argument to which the other side makes its arguments, and then a judge would make a determination, which in that case is called an quote opinion. But anyway, it's and everyone's entitled to their opinion. And as far as there was some, just, you know, we did have discussions with the planning board folks as far as what's the scope of the building inspector or building commissioner and this board. And I think, Patricia, did you have a few comments that you wanted to make about that particular issue?
Yeah, I'm just addressing my comments to other people on the commission who read the memo, and just reminding you that we all have the handbook that was prepared by the author of the ordinance and the planning board. And because the point was made by the applicant in this memo that the NHC's function is advisory under demo delay, based on the fact that the word advise is in the preamble to that ordinance. So I just want to remind all of us, so Article 10 of building demolition says that the intent of the ordinance is to preserve and protect significant buildings. And indeed, the applicant is correct that it says the NHC is empowered to advise the Newburyport Building Commissioner with respect to the issuance of permits for demolition. The ordinance then lays out a number of procedures which are not merely advisory, in that there's no process described under which the building commissioner can act in contradiction to the NHC's findings. So section 308 review procedures, the NHC is the sole authority in the determination of whether a building is historically significant and preferably preserved. The language says the commission shall notify the building commissioner. So the building commissioner may only issue a building permit for the demolition of an historic structure after the NHC's determination and notification process. And the building commissioner is acting on our determination as a fact, not contemplating it simply as advice that may be considered. As in the demolition plan review, the ordinance says if the application for demolition is based on a claim of structural deficiency, then the applicant may be required by the commission to submit a structural engineering report. So the fact that the commission is empowered under those circumstances to require that a report be submitted for its own review means that the structural condition of the building is of concern to the commission. So we have the preamble that talks about advise, but under procedures, we have determine, notify, required by the commission. And we see under demo delay that if we determine a structure is preferably preserved, then the building commissioner shall not issue a permit unless the NHC informs the inspector that the NHC has been satisfied upon specified conditions approved by this commission's, and that, you know, such conditions may include the review and approval of the site plans. Then we see that if the demo delay has been imposed by the NHC, the delay begins when we file our report, and the applicant may, you know, apply to receive a permit within the 12 months by submitting an amended plan, and that the applicant is free to go through that process as many times as they wish within the 12 months. Of course, we want to work with the applicant so that they don't have to wait the 12 months. That's one of our objectives. So as stated in our handbook, this review is required before the building commissioner may act in issuing this permit. And the specified conditions may relate to, and this is in boldface and underline in our handbook, the specified conditions that we impose may relate to any aspect of the structure. That's what it says. And then in section 5.3.10, enforcements and remedies, the NHC is described as the body that can give written approval to the building commissioner to issue a permit in the case in which an historically significant building or structure has been intentionally demolished without a permit. So that's what we went through on 12 Harrison, just reminding you. So the NHC is not described as recommending, but as really approving or not approving. The only time in this ordinance that we see the building commissioner acting unilaterally, independently in making determinations is in a case of emergency demolition. So it says serious threat to public health and safety. So yes, the applicant's right that, you know, building and construction are the domain of the building commissioner, but it's the scope of demolition as it will impact the historic structure that we've been talking about. That's why we talk about structural integrity. We're always talking about the extent to which certain kinds of demolition might, you know, in addition to destroying vintage framing materials, might jeopardize the rest of the structure. It's the demolition plan that is triggering our inquiry about structural conditions. Under demo delay, it says we review alterations to a structure or part thereof, including character defining exterior architectural features. And character defining architectural features are defined in the commission handbook to include, quote, architectural style and general arrangement and setting, along with kind and texture of exterior building materials, type and style of windows, doors, lights, chimneys, dormers, and other fixtures. So the applicant is correct that because the NHC is not the permit grantor, the NHC itself doesn't have the authority to condition the building permit. But the permit grantor issues the building permit for demolition only as a result of our actions. And we absolutely have the authority to condition our approval of demolition on certain conditions that we impose, ideally because the plan satisfies the standards. And as long as our conditions are aimed at protecting and preserving the historic research. So that's the intent of the ordinance. That's the ordinance as we've practiced it. And it's coherent with what is in the commission handbook that was, written in consultation with the drafter of the ordinance and the planning office, and also consistent with the laws of the Commonwealth. So just reminding you what's in our handbook. I know sometimes, we don't see each other, and sometimes when you get information, it can be sort of contradictory to what you might remember from the handbook, but always just go back and reference the handbook. So thanks, Glenn.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. So I will certainly allow, give you an opportunity to make your presentation, but I hope that I may be able to help things along a little bit with the following. Oh, and by the way, that we are at the end of the meeting, there's a section where we're going to talk about procedural things, and we are making a slight change to the way we do the voting on historical significance and preferentially or preferably preserved. That will, I think, clarify a little bit. Doesn't really apply in this particular case, but that's just an FYI coming a little bit later tonight. Anyway, as you correctly note, as Attorney Me, will you be presenting, or one of your other partners?
So I thought, so first of all, I appreciate everybody's attention to all of this. And our goal tonight is to attempt to clarify and get the commission to take a vote on what we're being proposed. And so we'd like to kind of roll back to what our proposal is, and get out of the weeds.
Okay.
And so what I'd like to do is turn this over to Scott Brown to remind everybody why we're here. I think that he has provided, a number of plans in the past, and he has confirmed with Jennifer as the board requested relative to the demolition numbers. And I'm going to turn it over to Scott. And I appreciate both the chair and the vice chair's various opinions as well.
All right, thanks. But for the architect goes on, and he will be allowed to speak, no problem there. But what I wanted to say is that, and first of all, we should, we can go through this quickly because it's been a while, so we want to refresh our memories as to what the proposal is. I looked at my notes from when we were last together, and I believe Scott said, is it Scott or Mr. Scott?
Scott
Brown, right? Okay. Said that if people are okay with the design, why don't we, go ahead and remove the delay? But we got involved in a discussion of structural issues. So since then, a couple things have happened. For one, we have the affidavit that you're probably all familiar with. That's the what's it called? I had a note here, the code and permit compliance affidavit.
Right.
And so I actually have a draft motion all prepared that I think will that would make sense, but if and only if we basically don't have any other concerns about the overall design. So with that kind of in our back pocket, so to speak, Scott, why don't you go ahead and just refresh our memory as to what the overall design is, and then we can hopefully resolve the issues as to what we need to worry about or not worry about structurally, and then we can perhaps make a motion, have a vote.
Good. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll keep this very brief because we've seen this application a couple of times. But again, Scott Brown, the architect for the project. So again, we're coming back to you. We are seeking a release from the demolition delay. This application is for a roof line change. We are only changing the roof on the back of the building. And Caitlin, if you could just go to our proposed elevations, sheet 822.1. Excellent, thank you. So we're only changing the roof line on the back of the building. For the most part, the windows remain the same size and in the same locations. And in this sheet, I've indicated in red where those changes actually are going to be. So we believe we've met all of the requests of this commission regarding the design of this project. I do not remember any concerns about the design at our last meeting on December 10th. And I also hope at this point, at least some of us can agree that some of the items that were discussed on the 10th are not the purview of the commission. Caitlin, if you could just go to the last sheet in the set here, X2. Okay, thank you. So I really wanted to point out the only change that we've made to the materials, and the only change that we've made is actually on this sheet in the upper right-hand corner. That is the rear elevation. This pause between hearings has made us think about our approach here and what we might need to do. So on this rear elevation, we are now showing an increased area of wall removal because we think that that is something that we might need to do. So despite this increase, you'll see in the lower right-hand corner of this sheet, we are still comfortably under the 25% DCOD special permit threshold. And Caitlin, if we could just go back to the proposed elevations again, A2.1. Thank you. So, I strongly believe that, we have the beginnings of what is going to be a good project. And again, what you're seeing here is a design that is in response to the comments of this commission. And with that, we would like to respectfully request that the commission release this project from the demolition delay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Scott. And that on that X2 sheet, that so those calculations included both that rear wall and those relatively small areas affected by the window changes, correct?
Correct, yep.
Okay. I think to your comment that you don't remember any design issues, I think the only one I think it was Mr. Morgan had some comments about windows, but I don't want to just rely on my memory on that. I think I did review my notes. I know Peter McNamee seemed to feel that overall the design, while having some drawback, I think he and I are in agreement that we aren't particularly crazy about the new roof line, but overall, as you just put it, Mr. Brown, it's probably overall an improvement. But why don't I see if any of my board members have reason to disagree with your assessment that it is a good project and there aren't any problems with the overall design. So board, that ball's in your court. But does anyone have any pro or con? Want to opine in favor or against the proposal? Patricia, is that a real fire going behind you?
It is, but I gotta keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that the footprint of the house won't change, that there's not the expansion of the rear yard. And I think we should support plans that preserve the footprint of smaller houses. I think Christopher Fay had mentioned, and maybe Peter, that they appreciate how the facade will look when renovated. I also like that this time the applicant included calculations about the percentage of the wall area to be demoed. I do think it's unfortunate that the original proposal to at least preserve the form of the roof line has been set aside. I know that was one, I can't remember if it was plan A, B, or C earlier, that roof line was the defining feature of the house. And I understand that roof was raised on this, pre-1800 house, and that roofs do get raised. And I think it makes more sense with the Secretary standards to preserve the roof line. I don't want it raised at the ridge line, but if no other commissioners take issue with that, and if nobody else has things to say about the windows, I yield to them. I think cutting 5 new windows isn't the best preservation outcome for the house, but I would be willing to support, a certain kind of motion to approve that with some caveats. I will also point out that I think we would be further along if the initial application had correctly shown where the chimney is. And just to say in general about applications, that when there are errors in the proposed plans, we always end up with continuances. It happened on 123 and it happened here. So, it's taken a while, but it's not only because we, have been talking about the exact same plan the whole time, so.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. Christopher, I see your hand also raised.
Yeah, I just, last time I had expressed some concern about how far we were digging into this, and I continue to have some reservations about how, where's our jurisdiction lie. But the other thing I just wanted to bring up briefly was there was some conversation last time about how this may relate to the other house on Harrison, right? To me, that's a slippery slope, because I understand the concerns in the commission. I have the same concerns, but I don't think we can apply. There's some bad actors. We've encountered at least 2 of them in my time on the commission that were willing to step before us. And I'll as a high school teacher, maybe it's just a little bit easier sometimes to maybe recognize the bad actors a little bit quicker than anybody else. I don't sense that here. We've seen Scott's work many times, and I don't always agree with his work and his designs, and I express that when I do, but I don't get the sense that the house is going to be torn down as a result of this. So I just wanted to bring that up, because we can apply that to anything. We could have just applied it to the bank. And so how can we trust the bank? How can we trust the next applicant to not lie to us and then tear down the house or tear down the bank or destroy the neighborhood type of thing? So I'm okay with this. I was last time, and that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you, Chris. And that's kind of what I was alluding to. Myself, the vice chair, Andy Port, Caitlin, Jennifer Blanchet, we did have some discussions about exactly what you're talking about there, Chris, as far as what is or is not our legal purview. It was some of the issues that Attorney Mead raised in her memo, and correctly so. So in light of that discussion and also then the clarifications we made, I have drafted a motion, which I'll read, and we can take a vote as to whether you all would care to approve this. I think if there are no major design issues, I think this should do it. So I'll go ahead and read it. Proposed motion. The 1-year demolition delay on 3 Hancock Street shall be lifted with the conditions that the code and permit compliance affidavit is signed, and that only the section of roof to be raised and its framing may be removed, semicolon. If additional demolition is found to be necessary, the applicant must return to the planning department for approval, period. So that's my proposed motion. Is there a second? Would you like me to read it again? Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fay seconds that. Okay, so I think Gretchen, our note taker, I'm going to assume that Mr. Conrath, I think he's still around there, but was never able to make himself heard. So I think we're going to have to assume, for the purposes of records and everything, that he's not here. So your vote, Chris?
Mr. Richards, actually, I apologize for interrupting, because I just need to understand the motion. So Mr. Brown has shown on this plan that in the event that back wall needs to come down, that would still be under the 25%, right? So does your motion mean that if that back wall needs to come down, he has to go to the planning department for approval of that? Or I just want to understand what you're saying here.
Okay, yeah, I didn't think, see, I drafted that before before I saw that back wall thing. Caitlin, go back to that X2 with that for a second. So, all right, so we'll hold off the vote for that for just a second. Or the voting. What can you, Mr. Brown, what is the rationale? Let me see if it, what's the concern that it gave rise to the possibility that you might have to demo that rear wall?
Well, one of the things that we did after the last hearing is we had a discussion, myself and, James Bork, who might be out there. James is the
builder, yeah.
applicant, the builder and the owner of this property. And we really took a hard look at that back wall and there's a lot of existing glass there, and it's a bunch of different windows that are slapped together, and really our proposal calls for a reduction in the amount of fenestration back there.
Right.
So we also need to lift that wall plate as well to sit those new rafters on, because that wall is getting higher. And James really thought about the difficulty of doing that. And, he really wanted us to show that entire wall being removed, because he thinks that's what's going to happen. So, and just in the interest of full disclosure, we just decided to show it all being removed for this application.
Okay, I'm making a slight modification. I'm going to withdraw that motion. I'm making a slight edit to it now that I think will remove this particular problem. Indicated. Give me 1 second. Demolition plan, and that's this is page X2. Okay, let me then first of all, thank you for, I'm actually almost glad you interrupted. So I've modified that motion. I'm going to reread it, and as far as procedurally, Gretchen, help me out here. I think can I just simply withdraw that even though it's been seconded and propose a new motion? Does anyone know?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So
Okay.
here is, thank you, Gretchen, very much. Okay, here is the new motion. Almost the same, slightly changed. The 1-year demolition delay on 3 Hancock Street shall be lifted with the conditions that the code and permit compliance affidavit is signed, and that only the section of roof to be raised and its framing and the areas indicated in the demolition plan, page X2, close paren, may be removed. If additional demolition is found to be necessary, the applicant must return to the planning department for approval. So in other words, what you've indicated there on X2, if you don't go beyond that, then you would not need to return. Does that modified motion have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Fay. Seconded by Mr. Fay. While your mic is still on, Chris, do you have a vote?
Yes.
Okay. Peter McNamee, your vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Morgan, your vote?
No.
No? Okay. That was right. It was a no, right?
That's correct. No.
Okay. Ms. Pecknick?
I'm abstaining.
You're abstaining? And me, I'll gonna vote a yes. So we have 3 yeas, a nay, and an abstention.
Is Malcolm on?
Well, I thought he was, but he still hasn't been able to make himself heard. Malcolm, if you can hear me.
And I've prompted him a couple times to unmute himself.
Yeah, which is *6, I believe, right?
Yep.
So Malcolm, if you're listening, try hitting *6 on your phone to see if you can unmute yourself. because Attorney Mead is very anxious we get a fourth vote on this. At least I think that's why she brought your name up.
Yes, sir.
Hmm. Yeah, still
Malcolm, do you want to try *9? Try that.
not.
No, not getting
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
Is it
Well-
possible that Malcolm's cell phone is the culprit here, and can he call in from a landline? Does he have the call-in information?
Yes, I gave him the dial-in information. That's how he is on the phone now. I don't know which type of phone he's using. Well, actually, I should be able to tell. 948. Let's see. Give me a second here. 948. That is his mobile line. I'm not even sure. That's the one I always use for him. I'm not sure if you have set, but if he's not, I'm not even sure he can hear us at this point, or if he's there, because he's not. Doesn't seem to be taking the required action. Well, what we can, yeah.
Glenn,
Yes.
are we saying that legally we have a quorum of
Well,
five?
we have a
people?
quorum in the meeting, but
Right.
legally,
We have a quorum of 5 or possibly 6 people, but it always requires 4 positive votes to do anything?
yes, because, right, that's the way I read the ordinance. A 4 is normally a simple majority of the board. So if we had 7 people and they were all here, we would need 4 positive or affirmative votes, and you could have up to 3 negative votes, but it would still pass. When people are absent, the way I read the ordinance is you still need an affirmative vote of a quorum, which is 4 people. Yeah.
Glenn?
So
If I'm just reading this, 4 members, this is a quote directly from Attorney Mead's memo, but I assume it's a quote directly from the law.
yes.
4 members of the commission, which is a simple majority of its members, shall constitute a quorum. We have that. Any approval shall require a positive vote of a quorum.
Right.
It doesn't say a
Right.
unanimous vote of a quorum.
Right.
Right.
It's the positive vote of the quorum, and I guess that's my point. So
And your interpretation is at, 3, because 2 would not be a positive.
that's
but
correct.
It would be a split so that it would be 3. And I know that that's your legal opinion. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a constitutional scholar recently, but
Right.
As we
Aren't
all
we
are.
all?
Well, Chris,
I don't know. To me, I mean, it's not my legal opinion, but I don't know.
We did check this with the planning office today, so.
You always have to have 4 positive votes, no matter what.
at least, yeah.
So and Caitlin's here, so maybe she can have a comment about that. I have to tell you, I disagree.
Yeah, I know.
I know you know that, but there are times when, for example, the planning board, it requires a vote of the membership of the body, not of those present, right? So in the planning board, for example, when you're approving a special permit, it's as the board is constituted, not of those present. This commission historically, and because of this ordinance, it has been a majority of those present, assuming there is a quorum present, obviously. But this commission has always acted on a majority of those present, not quorum.
Yeah, that's not what I was told today, that historically it's always required for affirmative
Chair-
votes.
Chair
I mean,
Richard,
I can just,
if I may.
oh, sorry.
Caitlin, go ahead.
Is that Peter?
Yeah, I actually, if the idea behind, if the idea is that we want to have 4 out of the 7 ideally vote, then what is the point behind a quorum if we're going to hold the exact same standard? The idea behind a quorum is to be able to have a deciding body. There is no mention of unanimous anywhere there. So I'm in agreement that that a positive vote means that a simple majority, essentially, of the quorum.
Okay. The a more productive avenue might be for me to ask Mr. Morgan if there's anything that could be done that would change his mind.
Well, I could make another motion and phrase it the way I'd like to see it proceed. Is that
Yeah.
fair?
Yeah, sure. There's
So
that
then,
motion's
I would
been,
make an alternative motion requesting from the applicant an engineering review of the proposed raising of the roof and relative to other interior modifications that they will be making. And this will be by an engineer on the, and this would be an engineer that would be acceptable to the city of Newburyport and to the Newburyport Historical Commission. I see this as actually a new precedent that I would like to apply for any projects going forward where a roof structure on a historical building is going to be altered, so that we can have visibility on the in a reasonable risk assessment about the possibility of demolition beyond what is actually proposed by an architect or builder without having that structural input and without knowing the condition of interior conditions, structural conditions. Okay, so my motion is to request that from the applicant this evening so they can start preparation of that, and so that they can get back to us in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, get back to us with a professional opinion from a structural engineer to make sure that the proposed roof changes and other changes are going to be compatible with the existing structure.
Mr. Chair, the applicant doesn't agree with that. With all due respect to Mr. Morgan, first of all, it's not something the commission has ever asked for before. There's no jurisdiction for that within the decision itself. Within the body of law governing the commission itself for such a report. So that Mr. Morgan can make that. The applicant doesn't agree with that motion and will not be providing that report.
okay, well, the applicant doesn't move forward then, I guess, because I am not persuaded that 3 positive votes pass the motion. I was going to, I think, well, it's true that we don't have any jurisdiction over things like interior and so forth, which Mr. Morgan suggested. I think that it could, I would have to look again to be sure, but I know there's mention of requiring reports to, usually it's in the context of when there's a demolition requested in the context of a full demolition due to conditions. They're saying that the house is too far gone to be salvaged. I believe that's the context of the authority of the board to request an engineering report.
Right. We're not requesting.
Yeah,
We've not applied for that.
Yes.
I'm
understand.
sorry, was it correct that it was explained to us that the rear wall would have to come down for structural reasons? I thought I heard that a little bit ago. Is that wrong?
We're not requesting to demo the entire structure for structural reasons.
Right.
That's not what we're requesting. And really, quite frankly, at this point, the applicant would be better off actually going and doing a significant demo over 25% and getting a special permit and changing the footprint of the house. If this is the kind of conditions that are going to be imposed on a project like this, which has a reputable builder and a reputable architect who's been very transparent and forthcoming, at this point, with the cost and the work that's being requested, it would really make more sense for the applicant to do a demolition control overlay district special permit.
Well, the only last thing I can suggest is there was one of the attendees I see is as listed as Rebecca Bork, that might be the builder. If the only thing is just is if he would like to comment on why he feels the engineering report is not necessary, that might sway the opinion of Mr. Morgan, you're welcome to, you know, provide that. The other alternative is whether we would, if, whether Vice Chair Pendick would, can reconsider her vote as well. That's another, that would also, if that vote changed, it would also permit the project to go forward. But I'm not pressuring anyone or trying to twist any arms. It's totally up to you guys, and you're, as they say in Congress, vote your conscience, so to speak. No, seriously, vote the way you feel is justifiable and defensible and consistent with how you think it should be. So having said that, Patricia, do you have any inclination to reconsider your vote?
No, sir.
Okay. The and is Ms. Mead, do you know if that attendee that's listed as Rebecca Bork, is that the builder, and do you think they would want to offer any?
He has nothing more to add other than what Scott has already provided.
Okay. Well,
Mr. Chair, may I say something?
yes. Who is that speaking?
It's Peter McNamee. I'm sorry.
Yeah, hi, Peter.
And I'd like to address myself to Commissioner Morgan. I understand where you're coming from on this, especially because, as Chris Fay mentioned, it is a slippery slope when we keep harking back to 12 Harrison, because that was a precedent, and we want to stand strong in this and make sure that we don't allow such to happen again. But I do think there is something to be said for the motion that the chair has put forth, which does bind the applicant to a certain course of action moving forward. And we are in a position to advise the building commissioner or not on the conditions. It's in the minutes, and we can make recommendation to take special care at looking at the hinge factor on the front wall, whatever it happens to be. I think everything is covered on this building. Moving beyond this building, moving beyond this application, we have now, I can't remember the name of the special application that, or the affidavit that was.
Yeah, code permit compliance, yeah.
Right, so we have that document moving forward, which I think addresses these concerns adequately. I do think that it is not in our purview to require engineering reviews. I understand where the motion comes from, and I admire where the motion comes from, but I don't think it's entirely necessary. And I personally would like to see this application move forward. So,
yeah, I would add to that. Thank you, Peter. I'm sorry, I didn't cut you off, did I?
Just to close by saying that I'd encourage Commissioner Morgan to reconsider.
Okay, yeah, and I would add to that. First of all, thank you, Peter, for that. And I would add that there are, in addition to this, commission, there are these overlapping and interleaved, if you will, layers of control between the building department, the enforcement officer, of course, the various codes and ordinances regarding how things are built and so on. They're even as far as the reputation and skill and background of the builder themselves. So in addition to the more recent controls, such as the affidavit mentioned. So I've personally felt, I agree with Peter's words there, that I totally understand the imperative to not create a situation where we run the risk of having another, demo by Slow Degrees. But I really don't think that that we're headed down their path in this particular case. I think, it's a different applicant, different situation. Maybe there, I don't think it's wishful thinking. I just don't get that particular vibe. But that's all I can say. But I don't know if we've convinced you. This is the last time I'll ask, do you have any inclination to change your mind to make it worthwhile taking another vote?
Well, Chairman Richards
Yes.
and Commissioner McNamee, I appreciate your comments and I appreciate your logic here. And your reasoned judgment. I don't want anyone to think that this is something about my questioning the integrity of the applicant or of the builder. It really has nothing to do with that. We've had a ongoing discussion over the last few months about how to really get our arms around this issue of modifying a structure that the structural integrity of which we are uncertain of, the reconstruction of a roof is a major modification because it increases gravity loads, it increases lateral loads, it changes the dynamic of the entire structure. Architects and builders find they can go in and they can make their conceptual modifications, and we can look at these types of orthographic drawings that show their concept. But when an architect tells me that they don't have a structural engineer on board helping them in looking at this or having done the full inspection of this structure, foundation, walls, especially when there's going to be a roof change, I just don't think that it's really unreasonable at all. I can't imagine any professional design team balking at being able to provide this information. I mean, it's something that is going to, especially if it could create significant cost. If any owner would want to feel assured that unforeseen and concealed conditions were not going to all of a sudden bloat their budget by 20%. I mean, it's a normal design process to have that type of information. Now, you may argue that for permitting purposes, well, why do we need it to get it through a historical commission? Well, it's because we're dealing with a historical building, guys. And I think it's not unreasonable to ascertain the risk of making these kind of extensive modifications up front. I don't think it's asking very much. I cannot imagine why there's so much pushback on this. And I'm actually serious until we really understand what our powers are, in other words, what constitutes a quorum and whether we can ask for an engineering report. Until we know what those ordinances are asking of us and are allowing us to ask ourselves of the applicants, then I would actually like to see a little bit more rigor applied to historical buildings that are proposing this extensive amount of alterations, including major structural alterations. So I'm going to stick with my no, and I hope we can have some more discussion on it. I really do think it would be good to have a procedural process here that tells us exactly what we should be asking for when we're looking at a historical building and an applicant is wanting to make this type of a change. I think it's fair.
Okay, I'm actually looking at the ordinance right now. It's a little difficult because there's in the DCOD, there's hang on a second.
Section 2-102 talks about the vote.
I will mention, Glenn, this is Caitlin. Remind you that we did bring this up with Director Port today at a meeting with planning staff and the chair and vice chair, and he confirmed that he was reading it, that 4 members need to make a positive vote.
Yes. The part I'm looking at is about whether we can demand or insist on the engineering report.
Well, Mr. Chair, here's the thing. You can, of course, you can demand whatever you want to demand, even though you have no authority to do it, because we're in the middle of this delay. And I'm not threatening anything. I'll remind some of the commissioners who've been around a while, not as a commissioner, because most of you are newer as commissioners. Some of you are actually new to the city of Newburyport. But for those who've been around the city of Newburyport for a while, recall a number of years ago, probably maybe 15 years ago now, where there was I believe, a modest request relative to a house on Marlborough Street. And there was a significant debate about what was being done, and the commission, quite frankly, dug its heels in. That house no longer exists on Marlborough Street, and it was a beautiful house. It was taken down at the end of the year. And it was a really sad thing to see happen. And so I'm not suggesting to this commission that this builder is going to do that with this house. I don't know what James is going to do, but I think there's a reasonableness factor that needs to be applied to everybody. And you have an excellent architect here. You have a well-respected builder who has come in. They have not sought to totally take to the extreme as much as possible the build out of this house on this lot, rather to preserve the petite nature of it on the street. And they have worked with the commission relative to what they originally wanted to do. And I understand the chimney was in the wrong place at the first time, but they have really worked to keep this house what it is. And to, quite frankly, I'm going to say pile on from what Mr. Morgan is requesting is overreaching. And at some point, somebody has to draw a line. And I don't know what the applicant's going to do, but I know that the applicant really was restrained in what he was applying to do. And it doesn't make sense. It does not make any sense. It's not reasonable. It doesn't make common sense. And I don't think it's good for the preservation of existing structures, particularly small structures in the city of Newburyport.
Well, I found what I was looking for. Thank you, Attorney Mead. And I appreciate what you're saying. I'm looking at Article 10, building demolition, because that's what applies in this case because of the roof line trigger. And under C, letter E, if the application for demolition is based on a claim of structural deficiency, then the applicant may be required by the commission to submit a structural report on the structure's soundness that is prepared by a licensed professional structural engineer. And I'm sure you're familiar with this because you've done that in other cases where there was significant demolition, or the demolition had as one or the reason structural deficiency. So now it's like, okay, is the fact that the roof is too low a structural deficiency, or is that simply a preference on the part of the builder or potential future occupants?
We didn't claim it was a structural deficiency. We've always said that the reason we needed to raise the roof is to give head height inside, which is at 5'5".
Right. I understand.
But the rear wall has to be demoed. Is that what was said? The rear wall has to be demoed because it structurally cannot withstand the work to the roof.
Well, we don't know. And this gets back to Mr. Morgan's point. That's unknown. And a lot of the other things are unknown because the builder apparently is, as far as he's willing to talk to us about it, is willing to wing it based on what he's done with other similar houses, despite the fact that the architect in this case uncovered, strange and surprising things when they started looking into walls. So I don't think Mr. Morgan is totally, unreasonable.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think for these reasons, and I think that the last thing I think Mr. Morgan said was like, I would think I would agree that why is it such a even it's possible that even an investigation by Mr. Bork himself might be sufficient to say that, okay, you know, I've removed interior walls so I can examine the framing. Here's some pictures of that, or maybe he probably has got engineers that he uses on a regular basis that can be brought in to confirm that that things are okay or not okay, and at least we would know.
Well, that's not
So-
that wasn't the motion that Mr. Morgan made. Let's be
Yep.
clear.
Yeah, I know.
So perhaps we modified the motion. Chairman Richards,
yeah.
is it possible to modify
Yeah,
the
that motion was
motion
never.
to incorporate both?
Yeah, that motion was never seconded, so there is not a motion on the floor at the moment.
So, Commissioner Morgan, is there a modification that you would suggest that is tending more towards the middle between the chair's motion and yours?
Well, while you're thinking about it, Joe, let me just read you what I wrote down while you were speaking the last time, which is a proposed motion. The applicant shall provide an engineering report as to the structural changes to be made, verifying that the changes may be safely accomplished. That's kind of a simplified version of what you were kind of saying. It doesn't say anything specifically in there about an approved engineering firm or anything, but so I'll leave it. So let me, turn it over to you.
I feel that there has to be an engineering report. It has to be based on a site visit and an examination of existing conditions. That's the bare minimum of what I would, and this is a licensed engineer, structural engineer. So that would be the minimum of my request. I'm trying to think about what our policy would be going forward. Relative to whether that should be an engineer that's hired directly by the architect or the applicant, or if that should be, I think I would be open to that. What really disturbs me is that there's not an engineer on board as part of the team, and an engineer that has not done the inspection of the premises. And it just, I just can't, frankly, I can't really understand why that would not have happened as normal course of action. But I think I would be open to that if the applicant could demonstrate that they're interested in this particular problem relative to the project that they're proposing. That the structure is something that is not only a functional part of the building, it's actually something that's historical, and that we want to limit its destruction and demolition as his project goes forward. I think that's, so I think that would be my compromise. It's saying that, no, the structural engineer is absolutely necessary. An inspection of the premises and a conditions report is necessary relative to the proposed work, but it can be part of the applicant's design team. Is that fair?
Mr. Chairman, I can address some of this.
Who is this, Mr. Brown
Scott
speaking?
Brown, yes. Very early on, we had a discussion about pulling the value of pulling a demolition permit and removing all the interior walls so we could see what was there. Ultimately, we decided not to do that, because once we do that, James's options with this project are limited, because he doesn't have, you would have a completely gutted interior of this house with no permit. So that's the reason why we decided not to do that. Bringing a structural engineer in now at a point where he or she can see very little of that framing makes zero sense. Bringing a structural engineer down the road where they can actually see what's going on makes more sense. But the problem here is, it's just what I said, once we remove those interior walls, James's options with this are really limited. So that's why we did not go in that direction.
If I may,
any sense.
if I may, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Brown. Is it possible as a way of bridging this, in this revised motion, our obligation is to advise the building commissioner. Can we not advise the building commissioner according to these concerns of yours, Joe? It may leave that to the building commissioner to determine whether or not they will press the applicant to generate an engineering review. I don't think that my impression, and I'm one of the new guys on the block here, my impression is that that really is not our purview. It would be nice for us to have that. It would be nice to have that as part of every submission, but it's not really the commission's purview. But it is the building commissioner's purview, and we're here to advise them. And I don't believe that we read the word advise in the ordinance as saying, you know, permit yes, permit no. It's advise.
Sorry, actually, Peter, according to Jared Eigerman, the author of the ordinance, the word advise here means tell. We actually tell the building commissioner. And I think Glenn just read the part of.
That's what I'm saying, though.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
Tell.
Tell the building commissioner this is what we recommend. It doesn't need to. We don't need to stop and see that review ourselves. The building commissioner should be reviewing that. So if our advice to the building commissioner is you should get an engineering review, you should require engineering review satisfactory to fulfill your obligations under the ordinance.
Right.
Then
yeah,
we can't do that official job for them.
But in the demo delay ordinance, the language is that the historical commission may require the applicant to submit a conditions or structural engineering report to itself, to the HC. That's what Glenn was reading.
Understood. Yeah, but we do want things to move forward, and we can trust the building commissioner, hopefully, to make those requirements and to review properly.
Really?
Yeah, while you were, sorry.
I feel like it's getting late, and you know, I'm not doing a good job of being a timekeeper, but there's other business to talk about. So,
well, I think we might be close enough. Let me read this.
Chris Fay would like to say something, though.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on a second. Got lost control of my various windows here. Let me find my Zoom window again. Okay, Chris, did you?
Yeah, just a couple things. One, it's getting late, and at some point I'm going to have to bow out because I haven't yet another stressful early day tomorrow. The second thing is I raised my hand, and then Peter said everything I wanted to say, but there is a building commissioner, and the building commissioner's job is to make sure that, for example, the house isn't torn down. And if the house is torn down, and if that's what our ultimate concern may be, I don't know what it is, then the city, through whatever mechanisms, has to deal with the violation there. And that's what we've been looking at here. We don't have the jurisdiction to go and say, you guys committed a crime here or anything like that. I guess the last thing I would say real quick is if we're going to ask for an engineering report or structural engineering report or whatever it is, or that's in the ordinance, that should be done at the beginning so that all that information is in front of us. And I just feel like this one here, I guess I understand Joe's concerns, but I just feel like now we're sort of throwing another layer of requirement on that again, we didn't necessarily, there's no real precedent for doing this that I remember in my 3 years on the commission, nearly 3 years on the commission, that we always required a structural engineering report that's acceptable to the commission. I'm not a structural engineer. I know Joe's an architect, and I appreciate that, but I wouldn't be able to read a structural engineering report because I would have no basis for doing that. So therefore we'd have to take Joe's word as the architect or anybody else that knows that. Just one more quick thing back to the quorum thing, or in this particular case, this seems to me, because we're just spinning our wheels now, this is a dead issue. We have 3 people, unless Malcolm appears magically at this meeting or any other meeting in the future while we're in the COVID world, this particular issue, there's 3 people in favor, 1 abstention, and 1 person voting no. This is, we could go round and round trying to convince Joe to change his mind or me to change her mind or trying to convince Patricia to vote, but we're spinning our wheels at this point. I don't, this is becoming non-productive.
Okay, well, I think while everyone was talking, I was editing a new motion. Let me first ask Mr. Brown and Ms. Mead on the behalf of the builder, if he, I'm going to read this proposed motion, which I think has a chance of passing, but let me first see if it would be acceptable to the applicant. And that motion would be, the demo delay shall be lifted on the condition that a code and permit compliance affidavit is signed, and applicant provide the building commissioner with an engineering report of existing conditions by a licensed structural engineer, confirming that the proposed structural changes may be safely accomplished. Is that something that you think Mr. Bork would be willing to go along with?
Yes.
Okay, is that something that my fellow members on the board would be willing to go along with? Particularly initials JM.
I would want the report to not just address the existing conditions, but that it addresses it relative to the modifications that are proposed.
Well, yeah, that's what it means by the structure.
So not safe. I wouldn't use the word safely. I would say that it addresses the proposed changes.
Okay, confirming that confirming that the proposed structural changes may be accomplished, or maybe.
That's right. That the demolition scope as proposed is adequate to accommodate the necessary structural changes to accommodate the proposed design.
I think I got it. Let me.
Or something like that.
Yep, I think I got it. I'll reread it again. I think.
Let me just remind why we're doing this. We're doing this because we're worried that when that modifications to existing walls, and it's not necessarily just concealed conditions, but it's modifications to existing walls, wall heights, relative, for example, the existing openings in the rear wall. It was already mentioned that perhaps those would not be sufficient to support the new roof structure. We're looking at those types of things that are really not within the purview of the architect to really address. We want an engineer to really review those and say, yes, this is feasible.
Okay. All right, let me reread my edited thing then. The demolition delay shall be lifted on the condition that a code and permit compliance affidavit is signed and the applicant provides the building commissioner with an engineering report of existing conditions, by a licensed structural engineer, confirming that the proposed structural changes and scope of demolition may be accomplished. Does that sound reasonable?
Sounds good. I'm good. I'm good with that.
Could I take that as a second, Mr. Morgan?
Indeed.
Okay. All right. In that case, let's do take a new vote then. Stand by. Starting with Mr. Fay.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. McNamee.
Yes.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Ms. Pecknick, I assume you're still abstaining?
Yes, I.
Okay. And I'll vote a yes. So that means for the applicant and the attorney that the motion is carried with 4 yays. So we can, let me just say, I'm just going to make a slight clarification. The demolition delay, I'll just say on 3 Hancock Street. I should have put that in there. I don't think that, just so we're clear, shall be lifted, etc. So, and Gretchen, I can forward that for you since I have it all neatly typed out, if that helps you. Okay, good. So, if those conditions, we will communicate with the planning board and the building commissioner, Attorney Mead, that upon those conditions being met, one of them being quite easy, actually, the affidavit, that the building permit can be issued. This removes that risk that Mr. Brown described of doing a lot of interior demo and being kind of caught with no permit to go forward to build anything. Okay, so I hope that is a satisfactory outcome for you all.
Thank you.
Great,
right.
thank you for the extra effort to get us over the hump here.
Yep, you're welcome. Okay, there are a couple other things. I don't think any of them are particularly long, especially because one of the items that might have been a longer discussion on 10 Auburn Street, that's the old jail property. We postponed that because we are going to have to discuss that a little bit. So let me see if I can go through these fairly quickly. So the 10 Auburn Street update, we'll do that on our next meeting. 6 Hamilton Way update is very simple. To refresh your memory, that's the property it's an old Gothic revival type house just off High Street. Was part of a little mini subdivision. There was a preservation restriction on the house as part of getting approval for that, blah, 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 and there was this they started to do something like a deck in the back. There's no action being taken on that right now. I'm in the process of reviewing the preservation restriction to see exactly if they might not even be out of compliance with that. There's some, I'm talking with Jennifer about that and reviewing the whole situation. At any event, kind of nothing to see here, move along for the moment in that it's kind of status quo, but I will be following up with that to see if we can get it off our agenda completely with them either well, one way or the other. But that was something that I wanted to follow up on. And I had some personal crises over the past week or so that kind of impeded my time to spend on this, so I wasn't able to quite finish up on that. The CPC seeking NHC representative, that's the I want to say so badly want to say consumer product, but it's not. It's Community Preservation Committee and their grant system and so on. I've decided that I'll go ahead and be willing to do that function for at least this year. We have a new member coming on to the Historical Commission, at least I'm pretty sure we will. We have an applicant that's already been through their first hearing by the City Council. Their second one is on the 25th. So at our very next meeting, we should be up to 7 members. And if we can get, I think Malcolm said he's, believe it or not, might be buying a new computer. So maybe we can have a full participation by all 7 members for our very next meeting. That's my hope, and I hope we can do that. So for this year anyway, I'll go ahead and be our representative on the CPC, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, the demolition delay flow chart and voting procedures. Jennifer, do you, actually not Jennifer, sorry, Caitlin, do you have the, that flow? Oh, you do. Good for you. This is the, flow chart. You remember we had a lot of head scratching and so forth about this. What does it mean to be historically significant and preserved, not preferable, but preferably preserved, and so on and so on. We had a discussion with the planning board staff and Patricia and myself, and it turns out that the way we're implementing the ordinance can be clarified and simplified. And I think you all have this flow chart now. I think this will make it easier and clearer for all people concerned. And I know some of the new members like Peter and Joe were particularly trying to, struggling with figuring this out. So what we're going to do is there will be 2 separate votes. The first vote is very simple. Is this structure historically significant or not? Period. End of story, right? If it's not, then we're not interested. If it is, then there is a demolition plan review at the output of which is a public hearing and so on. We hear from the public, we hear from ourselves, we hear from the applicant and so on. At the end of which we take the second vote, which is this structure preferably preserved or not? If it's not, and there's been only a couple like that, then again, they go on their merry way. If it is, can you scroll down a little bit more so I can see the rest of that flow chart, Caitlin? Thanks. If it is preferably preserved, then we get to, one of those 3 options. There's the 12-month delay is imposed, which, they can either wait that out, or typically they agree to a demolition permit based on various conditions approved by the NHC. We just saw an example of that a few minutes ago. And finally, I have yet to see this in my tenure, that the applicant provides, this evidence of a authentic effort to find a buyer that's willing to deal with whatever the structure is and keep it, and so on and so forth. Again, that's kind of a rare thing. It's usually it's usually that option where the applicant comes up with a revised plan that we can go along with. So this is the flow chart we'll be following. I think this will make things a lot easier. So the output of that first vote is that the structure is historically significant and considered for preservation. So then, that's when we then go into the whole review of the plans and everything. So let me just shut my mouth for a second. Is that clear to folks, or does anyone have a question on that? No, not hearing any vociferous objections on that. Okay, so I want to, you can tell you can probably tell I'm speed talking here to try to wrap this up. The two letters in the correspondence, forgive me, Caitlin, I haven't even had a chance to read them myself. We talked about the CPC spot already. Oh, on the ordinance specifically calls for the officers, that's me and your vice chair, the chair and the vice chair, I should say, to be voted on the first meeting of the year. I'm going to propose a motion, which I will ask you guys to vote on, that we move that to the second meeting. We vote on officers at the meeting on, 25th or whatever it is, 28th, whatever it is. So I move that we take that vote at our next meeting on the 28th. Is there a second for that?
This is Joe. I'll second that.
Okay, so can we do a real quick roll call on that? As I see Chris's video has gone dark. I'm not sure if he's there. Okay, Chris, are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Pecknick?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a yes. Okay, so that's carried. So we will vote on that next time we meet, chair and vice chair. And in case you were all wondering, I don't know if you were or not, I will stand for re-election if you guys choose. And are you standing for re-election, Patricia,
Yes,
so to speak?
I suppose so. Unless somebody else.
Unless somebody else. Okay, well, we can talk about that next time we meet. Caitlin, I literally know nothing about these two letters on the shoreline resiliency and the 265 Water Street. How could I forget? I do know something about that. And let me go to that first, because we need to take a vote on that, I think. You might remember 265 Water Street. This was the one where thank you, Caitlin. They were going to do this huge dormer, and we said, no way, Jose. They have gone back, and what they've done is come up with a dormer that they can do, quote, by right. They don't need our approval for. However, we imposed a demo delay. So legally, we probably need to release the demo delay for the building commissioner to issue a permit, which he should be able to do, because what they're proposing to do does not require our approval. So Jennifer has requested that we vote to release the demolition delay. So I'll put that in the form of a motion that the Historical Commission approves the release of the demolition delay that was imposed on 265 Water Street. Does that motion have a second?
Chairman Richards, before we vote on that, who made the determination that it was by right?
The zoning enforcement officer.
Okay, so that it is in fact by right. It's not arbitrary. Okay.
Yeah, right. No, definitely not. Yeah.
All right, I'd second then.
Okay, so the movement, does everyone understand what the motion is and why we're doing this? think you do. Okay. Mr. Fay, your vote on that?
I guess I don't have a choice. Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of pro forma, but I think we should legally do it. Peter?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Morgan?
Yes.
Ms. Pecknick?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair votes yes. So we'll let Jennifer know that that has been taken care of. So Caitlin, is there anything you can say about the Shoreline Resiliency Project letter?
Yeah, just that this is a letter from MHC that you all were copied on, that there's no adverse effect for this shoreline resiliency project, because I guess a piece of it's in the historical district.
How, when do they need an answer on that? Did they say?
I checked in with Jordy Binding, our senior project manager, and there's nothing that you need to do. It's just sort of an FYI.
Oh, so, well, they don't want our opinion as to whether there's an adverse effect or not, or they do?
Mass Historic has said that they've made the determination that there is no adverse
Oh,
effect.
I see. So, oh, okay, gotcha. I misunderstood. Okay, thank you for that. So I will take a look at that. It sounds like, and they're usually pretty persnickety. So if they've determined that, I think it's going to be unlikely that I will find something, but I will take a look. And we're down to the approval of the draft minutes. Did anyone have any objection or corrections or objections to the minutes that Gretchen sent out? Not hearing or seeing anything there. So I'll make a motion to approve the draft minutes. Is that seconded by someone?
Seconded.
Thank you, Mr. Fay. Mr. Fay, your vote?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, hang on a second. Ms. Pecknick?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'll vote yay on that as well. So we have approved the draft minutes. Thank you very much for your efforts, Gretchen. And finally, would someone care to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Fay. Is that seconded?
Second.
Joe, this is Joe. I second.
Okay, seconds by Joe, I think, and Peter. Okay, Mr. Fay, your vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Morgan.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Pecknick.
Yes.
Thank you. And I will also vote yes, thereby officially closing this meeting. Thank you all. We managed to finish before 10 o'clock, which is nice. Chris, thank you for sticking with us. I know you are a busy guy and have an early schedule, so thanks very much for sticking it out. And with that, we end the meeting.
Thank you, Chair
Night,
Richards.
folks.